Get 5 coffins ready.
With SMITE 2 on the horizon, sorta, it's cast quite a shadow on SMITE 1, which I guess for now is still just SMITE. SMITE 2 is going to have better visuals, more clear audio, less jankiness, and more visual clarity in the user interface both in-game and in the menus. So it's difficult to not see every single fault in SMITE, both big and little, feeling a little more apparent and obvious than ever. Of course, being the beacon of positivity that I am, immediately I started writing a video about what I think is the biggest mistake Hi-Rez made during SMITE 1's lifetime. But then I thought about it for a second and I'm like, what's the point of that? Not to say that video is not still coming, it definitely is. But before I, take a big old poop on this game, that I've spent 9 years of my life playing, I felt like it only made sense to say why I stuck with it all this time, despite some very clear flaws. And yes, I mean why I stuck with it all this time, as this is all just from my perspective and my experiences with the game. I'm not saying these are absolute truths and things that everyone agrees with and thinks are good about SMITE, I'm just giving my 2 cents before this game really starts winding down, which allegedly should be towards the end of 2024. So first and foremost, let's touch on how SMITE feels. Like, gameplay-wise, I mean. What did you think I meant? And if we're going to talk about raw gameplay feel, it's gotta be my boy Susano. He just exemplifies all that's right with SMITE's gameplay at large. Satisfying animations, rapid animation cancels, and best of all, responsive controls, once you have the timing down. Performing Susano's bread and butter combos with expert precision just feels right, like the game and I are communicating as one, or something like that. Same goes with Thor, a god who's almost as old as some of my viewers now, and for largely the same reasons as Susano. Everything is so snappy and responsive, and once I realized you could time your one with the windup of a basic attack for an instant double tap and to teleport into basic attack combo, I knew that Thor was one of the best examples of SMITE's responsiveness and its precise gameplay. Just as good as those snappy characters are the smooth feeling characters like Ishtar. In everything she does, her basic attacks, her special basic attacks with her 1, the rolling lightning of her 2, her sort of spin kick thing on her 3, it's all just so slick. One issue a few characters run into, such as Surtur or Osiris, is that when you reach really high attack speeds, they sort of look, doing good on air there, buddy? But with Ishtar, all of her special basic attack stances look so slick and natural. It's clear a lot of work went into making both the basic attacks themselves and Ishtar herself look confident and clear even at the wildest of animation speeds. And how can I not talk about the king himself when it comes to satisfying gameplay feel? Like everyone else here, he requires timing to get the most out of his smooth gameplay, but yes, it is worth it. Once you get the timing down of his basic attack lunge, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from rampaging around the battlefield like a spinning top. Sloosh slicing through everybody. Unless you're against like Nox or something. Stellar animations, a wonderful gameplay loop, and endless ways to mix up your combos to throw opponents off guard and slam their face into the dirt. At least before it hits a late game. After that, he's kinda shit. But on the note of King Arthur, he is a very unique MOBA character to boot. A fixed attack speed, always instant cast abilities, a stance switcher with no stance switch ability, launching basic attacks, and so on. This leads into another great aspect of SMITE, how Hi-Rez always tries to do at least something new with each character. Now this isn't always great or something significant, like Martikaras's basic attack speed and damage over time, I mean, who cares about that, or Bakekujira's, everything. But you can't deny that Hi-Rez always tried to do something new. Bake, despite being awful to play against, is still unique. An AoE based attack all around himself, a protections to basic attack damage conversion, and an attack speed to haste conversion, speeding up his inherent basic attack movement speed penalty. It's all new stuff to SMITE, 130 gods in. And again, I hate this god, I hate him to death, but it's a testament to Hi-Rez putting out a god that a decent amount of people may not like due to his slowness, but at the very least he is a unique addition to the roster. A melee assassin who has no movement inhibiting abilities other than the slow on her ultimate, requiring the use of her dash to deal burst damage, and can enter walls? It's very special to have a god like this in the game, even if her core gameplay isn't exactly exciting once you get over the fact that you can go inside of walls. But of course it didn't just stop on, hey, she can go into walls, that's cool. There's also her landmine ultimates, extended range dash, and cone AoE first ability in the wall as well, adding a whole nother layer to the character, and rewarding you spending a lot of time with her. Yeah, she can be a pain to fight, especially when your team is, not playing like a team, but we're all better for having such a unique and interactive character in the game. Well, she's not really interactive in a 1v1, she just kinda kills you, but you know what I mean. The same goes for Yomoja and her Omi system. Not the most unique idea for resource meter in the grand scheme of things, but yet again Hi-Rez shows they're going out of the way to bring something totally new into the game. A god with no cooldowns, but instead a sensitive resource meter that requires finesse to make the most out of during fights. Little Miss 30 nerfs over here has been quite a problem balance-wise for sure, but you gotta admire Hi-Rez's stick-to-itiveness to not change around the core design of Yomoja too much, like they may have done in the past, looking at old Nox here. These days, after her 1,000,001 nerfs, you have to really pick your every move just right to ensure you give yourself enough resources to either continue fighting or get yourself and your team out of danger with your third ability. And of course, Yamoja's abilities themselves are unique too. The bouncing slowing bubble, a shield that heals and bounces to allies, her 3, a deployable that enemies and allies can use. It's just great design, if not a little bit too strong for a very long time. But if you want to talk about ambitious, we gotta touch on the Morrigan before moving on. Not only is she a pure mage assassin, an archetype not really seen in Smite up until that point unless you count Hebo and Ao Kuang, she can literally turn into anyone in the current match with her ultimate. And yeah, this kinda ruined Smite for a while. For about the first year of her release, every match was a bit of a coin flip as to whether or not it would break or someone's game would crash. So, that was a thing. But, like with Yamoja, they stuck with this insanely interesting concept of a god who can literally just become someone completely different. Man, now you don't even see bugs on the Morrigan, most of the time. Regardless, the Morrigan to me is the best showing of Hi-Rez's ambition when it comes to creating new and exciting characters with unique abilities that other characters simply don't have. And barring Viego and Silas from League of Legends, who by the way were released after the Morrigan and play similarly to her, characters like this simply aren't seen often in PvP games. They can create bugs, create unfun game states or combos, and so on. But despite being a B-tier game using an F-tier game engine, Hi-Rez stuck with this awesome idea for a character, and now that things are all said and done, she's one of the most fun, engaging, and interesting characters in the game to play in the mage category. Not to mention, fairly well balanced too. Not my best idea to springboard into my next reason for loving Smite with a character who can literally be any character, but I've always appreciated how clearly defined characters are in Smite, in generalities, when it comes to their designs. When characters feel like they lack identity or purpose, even if this means they're viable in multiple roles, it's usually a sticking point for players not liking them in Smite. And this is because despite always trying to give new characters some sort of unique ability or mechanic, Hi-Rez always tries to give characters a clear direction and purpose. For example, Erlang Shen. Despite the neutering of this character when they removed the knockup from his turtle form, Erlang has always been good at one thing and one thing only, frankly. He is the 1v1 god. One-on-one, if Erlang has counter items built against you, he will beat you in a 1v1. It's what he's made for. Basic attacks that scale with the enemy's health, and is able to use items that proc on basic attacks and abilities alike thanks to light AoE damage and massive attack speed stims. And of course, being able to slip on damage items and tank items alike, but obviously, Smite's not a 1v1 game, and when Erlang gets dogpiled, well, he kinda sucks. Apply anti-heal to him, use shell on whoever he's trying to kill, and boom diggity, he's probably gonna die. Or try to run away at least. But in that way it creates a balanced character. In a more even match, his clearly defined strengths and weaknesses make him as easy to stop as he is to win with. It all just depends on how he's played as much as how he's played against. And this might sound odd, but I find Chronos to be very well defined too. The guy is a one-shot machine, but only very late into the game. Chronos is one of the few gods in Smite who can genuinely one-shot your opponents. If you want to know how, here's the full tutorial. Get to full build, get to 30 minutes into the game thanks to your passive, use the 2 on your third section of your 2, blink, 3, basic attack, 1. This will kill any squishy in the game, seriously. But if you do this before 30 minutes, you will first get laughed at, and second, you will die. You see, Chronos gracefully toes the line between holy shit this god is useless, and holy shit this god is broken throughout the match. Bad in the early game, okay in the late game, and overpowered in the hyper late game. Towers, objectives, gods, it doesn't matter. Chronos will destroy them all if you give him enough time to get his items and passive going. But it's quite easy to kill Chronos early on, so long as you don't just, sit in front of him so he can just stun you off of himself. And even in mid to late game teamfights, he's still pretty easy to pick out, even with his unique ultimate. So he has this through line of being punishable throughout the match, but becoming more and more worth the risk of playing him as the game goes on. He really becomes an addicting character to play once you've gotten a taste of just how strong he can become. But regardless of that, he is still a glass cannon, so as much as you need to respect him when playing against him later on in the match, you as the Chronos player need to respect how easily you can be killed if you get overzealous. Someone who can't really die is the boy himself, Geb. This sounds weird reading aloud, but Geb is perfectly defined as a jack of all trades. Sounds like a monkey's paw, but Geb perfectly encapsulates this playstyle of both being a great aggressive tank and one that can defend his teammates against all odds, because Geb, come on man, he's got Geb Shield. The biggest FU to frontliners and assassins alike, a stellar peel tool that's unmatched in Smite when it comes to single target peel, maybe other than a Capri ultimate. Then he has his ultimate, massive AoE with percent health damage and flat high burst damage as well, so good for aggression. So this guy has a free, unmissable peel tool with his 3, the Geb Shield, a way to engage with a Blink ultimate which stuns an AoE and deals very high damage, and a perfect follow-up with his second ability which knocks up. So how is he not OP? Well, the 2 scales, dealing less damage as it travels, and it travels slow. His ultimate makes him stand in place to do it, meaning he needs to position himself right or not at all. His Geb shield, okay, it's pretty darn strong, but his only form of movement, his rollout, has some of the harshest restrictions and easiest to play around mechanics in the game. So all of this makes him perfect to play as a god you can rely on for defense and someone you can rely on to play aggressively in teamfights. But you gotta play him right, or else you'll blink and stun on 5 people for no reason, or god help you, Geb shield a single basic attack because you misinterpreted that basic attack as the enemy team engaging on you. As a Susano player, fuck you Geb, but I can't deny how well designed he is. Speaking of good designs, we should touch on some of the visual designs of Smite. First, hats off to Amaterasu, so she's not a one-to-one of her mythological counterpart. But who cares, they made a skin for that later anyways. If you ain't noticed, me am not Japanese, or frankly a part of any culture we're about to speak about, but to me Amaterasu perfectly encapsulates the broad strokes of her lore in the greater mythology, but also has the accents disseminating her character lore and her culture as well. She feels quote-unquote Japanese, but it's done in such a way that feels like she embraces her culture and her story, rather than the typical, she's Japanese, so she wears robe and has sword? She speaks to her culture, she speaks to her own mythology, she speaks to me, in a special way. She's great, just like Iset. Now, Iset is a god who was remodeled from a character made in 2012 named after a terrorist organization. Why you'd name yourselves after terrorists, I have no idea, but it's all good since it gave us Iset. A goddess who encapsulates all of her mythological counterpart throughout her abilities and base design alike. All the colors and designs, at least in my eye, feels at home in the mythology and was brought to life with the utmost detail by Hi-Rez. You see, anytime I'm getting ran down by an assassin or a tank when I'm playing as Iset, it's all good, because I have plenty to admire while I'm getting destroyed. So maybe the balance team doesn't love her as much as the design team, but it's all good. So now we really have to take a moment and take a hat off to anyone who's worked on a skin in Smite as well. Now obviously, skins are what makes Smite money. They should be good, but it's undeniable that Hi-Rez went extra steps to ensure that Smite skins were worth the money. Completely new voice packs, including VGS commands, which seriously is over 100 lines of dialogue per skin. Other games have lots of skins, but in case you didn't know, they don't change the voices like what they do in Smite. As a certified whale, very rarely do companies go out of the way to give skins full-fledged voice packs, but for 99% of the skins in Smite, Hi-Rez do. Not only do they give us compelling skins with unique appearances and implied storylines, they give jokes, taunts, laughs, and hundreds of voice guidance systems commands to truly flesh out every last skin. I know they only did this because it's their best way to make money, but even Smite's biggest haters can't deny that Hi-Rez went way out of their way to give us the highest quality and most complete skins out of any of their contemporaries. Looking at you, League of Legends. Charging me $10 for a skin and then do nothing to the voice. I'll show you a blood move. So on that note of giving the default characters plenty of characteristics of their own, connecting back to their own culture, and skins creating entire cultures of their own, we gotta touch on the personality of Smite, which to me is one of the biggest reasons for the retention of Smite. I'll steer away from my mainest man Susano and my wife, Amaterasu. What? Yeah, of course she's my wife. And turn it over to Bellona, one of the poster childs of Smite. And for good reason. Through great in-game animations, wonderful voice acting, writing, and directing, and even the design of her abilities themselves and how they function in-game, this character exudes control and dominance. Her design is overall contemporary, but mixes themes of modern design as well as nods to her cultural origins, for example her flag and shield as well. She's a badass female warrior who doesn't feel like a caricature. She doesn't feel shoehorned in to fill any archetype or please masses. She suits her role in the game wonderfully, with no negative feelings of being over the top or unnecessary. And other than the obvious additions of full voicing, full of jokes, taunts, laughs, and again, of course, the hundreds of voice guidance systems voice lines added to characterization, there's emotes too. Waves and claps, yeah, it sounds kinda stupid praising them, but I'll be damned if again, Hi-Rez took every opportunity they could to give characters extra development through them. And of course with some characters getting dances too, such as Bellona's, whatever this is. And when it comes to personality, few come close to Mr. Chalk. Brash, funny, and with abilities that perfectly mirror who he is, with a wonderful blend of the mythological Chalk, whose name of course wasn't always Chalk, blended with a human form to make it look a little more presentable. Here Hi-Rez took what is frankly a barely explored mythological god and turned him into an exceptionally entertaining character to experience and play as, while keeping as many nods to his origins as possible. Chalk was a pretty early god though, so he is a little too cartoonish, and as Smite matured, Hi-Rez matured their visions for gods and brought them closer to what their actual mythological counterparts were, both in terms of visuals and characteristics, i.e. making monsters and anthropomorphic creatures actually what they're supposed to be, and maturing their writing for the characterization too, this peaking in the two voodoo gods, Baron Samedi and Maman Brigitte. Not only do they encapsulate perfectly their mythological counterparts, they are of course, like all Smite gods, given exceptional details in their voice lines and direction of those voice lines, as well as of course their animations in-game. Everything from Baron's over-the-top jumping animations to Momoth's heavily bleeped-out voice lines tells you exactly what type of characters they are without even needing to read their lore. Yet once you do read their lore, the work done on these gods is even more endearing. From the inclusions of Baron's coffin, indicating an entry to the underworld, which, by the way, is one of the most iconic and defining abilities in the game, to Momoth's excessive, well, okay, in her opinion, reasonable drinking habits shown in her rumometer, as well as tasteful and cute abilities alluding to their connections with snakes in the spirit world, like Momoth's second and third, and Baron's, second and third abilities. It's like they're connected somehow. And in case you didn't know, these two gods are a couple, and one thing I always appreciated is that Hi-Rez didn't feel the need to shoehorn their relationship. Through subtle in-game voice lines and of course, their respective lores, right there in the game, Hi-Rez respects you enough to figure out that these two are a couple, and a power couple at that. Not like Hou-Yi and Chang'e or Iset and Osiris. This is obviously just the best example. But okay, we're deep in this video, so what do I think is the best thing about SMITE? Honestly, the community. Now I know you're going to say, SMITE is one of the most toxic games in all of human history. Nobody helps, everyone AFKs, and you know, just the other day, someone called me a poopy head. And honestly, that's true. The community does include people like that, even that last one. But the last place I'd be, if everyone were like that, is here. You don't need to know my entire personal history to know that if the only thing in this community were toxicity and negativity, I'd have left it a long time ago. No, the reason I'm here is because along the way, sifting through negative experiences in-game and out-of-game here and there, is because whenever I posted anything, my early, frankly horrible gameplay videos, my still pretty horrible opinion pieces, my highlight videos, funny moments videos, and later on my more well-constructed opinion pieces, and of course my god guides, I had significant backing from the SMITE community. Sometimes this is without them realizing. Pro players simply giving their input on the current meta and what the best builds and characters were for the current meta, and their role, but most importantly, why they were the best, to mid-level players like myself who appreciated that for some reason, despite having such an awesome game like SMITE, things like even medium production level videos like mine, such as with my god guides, simply didn't exist for a large portion of characters, and now finally at least someone was making video guides for them. To of course, the newest players among us. Those likely most sensitive to the negativity around the community. Telling me that videos that I think are just okay are more than enough to inform them about some of the awesome characters and keep them playing this cool little game named SMITE. So if I had anything to say to the SMITE community, this is not the end. Whatever positives you can find about SMITE, whether it's many things or even a few, try and find others in the community to share them with and continue supporting them so that we can propel SMITE forward, so we can make SMITE 2 even half as amazing as SMITE 1 was. That's all I have for now, thanks for watching.